And just in case you're not familiar with our work by any chance, this is Amy's work here. So a beautiful piece here. And then my work is over here, which you're going to see in the back. So definitely kind of, after we're done talking, please spend time and check it out.
So Noah's going to go first, and he'll talk briefly about his work, and then I'll talk about my work, and then we'll have Q&A and questions.
Yeah, sounds good. So I guess I'm going to start by talking, I kind of want to talk about the title of the show a little bit, because I thought it was a really good title that I was very happy with. I thought it described both our work in a way. And one of the central kind of themes of my work is kind of the emergence of life. I think we all kind of these encounters with tension or difficult periods, and I think kind of this is a really important thing that we have to learn to deal with in life, and it's also, I think, for me anyway, a central part of how I view creation of art. I had a friend who was having difficulty when they were meditating. They had these very dark experiences they would encounter in a certain period. And they talked to various teachers who all kind of gave them answers that these were things that they just need to keep meditating, or they don't have any answer or explanation for it. And when she told me about this, it actually made perfect sense to me, because it reminded me very much of the process I go through when I create art. And I think, any sort of kind of creation of art, and the best art comes from a place, I think, of expressiveness. It's revealing something hidden. It's taking some, aspect of the artist, and it's emergence. And I think kind of, many artists kind of struggle with that aspect of it. They get caught up and they try to, they're in a place where they get hyper-focused, and there's this kind of element where it feels like it gets really tight, and there's not that kind of passionate element that comes through. And for those artists, that's maybe they can work into that, and that's something that benefits their art. But for me, kind of the key element of my art that is so centrally important to what I'm trying to say and kind of express both through their art, I guess, kind of in larger life as well, is kind of taking those things and I guess almost transmuting them. So, ultimately, I look at the world and I see many aspects of it that are difficult for me. I see, I think in some kind of spiritual traditions, there's this tendency, or art traditions for that matter, to walk through something like nature and, idealize it. But, I spend a lot of time in nature, and when I'm there, I see all sorts of things. I see the immense beauty of sunsets or rolling storm. But, I also see kind of things that are very difficult. I see hunting, I see killing, I see destruction. And these seem to me, at least from what I've seen in the world, to be very central parts of what make up this reality we find ourselves in. And it's the sort of thing where I can't deny it. It's not something I can tamp down and say, oh, this doesn't exist. I just want my art to be, flowers and rainbows. Which isn't to say they can't be flowers and rainbows, but if there are flowers and rainbows, I want the flowers and rainbows to, also somehow acknowledge these other things. And I think kind of the real power is when you can look at kind of the totality of the world, the good, the bad, the beautiful, the things we find ugly, and say, okay, even with all these things in, it makes up a total whole, something that's complete and beautiful and perfect. And I don't think you can honestly say that without kind of looking at the things that are difficult. I don't think there's any inherent part of the world. I don't think there's anything that tells me that the world has to be a certain way. I don't think there's anything that says that this is, sunset's inherently beautiful or a piece of roadkill is inherently ugly. I think it's just my perceptions of it. And so I think kind of when I look at those things, I want to look at those things and say, okay, I can see this clearly, and I can say this is beautiful, and I can say this is perfect. And so when I'm creating art, this is very central to the process, where I so often kind of try to take things either in the world or personally, and I try to acknowledge them, feel them, and with that in mind, bring them to the surface in a way that is transformative. And so often when I'm creating art, it is, I want the process of my paintings to be both a reflection of this process, but also, as I'm creating art, this is literally happening. So oftentimes the paintings will start off with this kind of, period of difficulty or tension or something that, I or the world is struggling with. And as I'm creating, I am processing this. I'm letting this come to the surface. I'm seeing this, and I'm trying to transmute this into something beautiful, something transformative, it's never a straightforward process. It's not always easy, but and so oftentimes if you look at my paintings, you'll see scrape marks or gouges or kind of representations of kind of my own psychological state as I'm painting this. And then I would like to think that as this is happening, you're also seeing this other thing come out of it. And in many ways, I think this is the process of life in the world, where it's we're looking at all these things and facing all these things, and we personally have this process of trying to how do we deal with it, and this aspect of can we transform them in this way? Can we have light come out of this? And ironically, I think oftentimes the less we want to look at the things in the darkness and acknowledge those things, kind of the more strongly it's like a fermentation process or something. If we picture a dark room, if there's something in the dark room, it looks to our eyes as darkness, but all darkness is kind of hiding of what's there. And so we look in the dark room and we hear a noise, and that noise could be a kitten or it could be a tiger. And we have no way of really knowing unless we turn on the lights and look clearly at what it is. And so it's a very strange thing that in some ways kind of the process of dispelling darkness, the process of creating light, is to look at it, to see it, to acknowledge it, and to accept it. And by doing so, transform the tension into light. Thank you. And I think maybe, do you want to do maybe like 2 sets of questions and answers?
Sure.
Yeah, so if anyone has any kind of questions for me or about that or anything else, or comments, I'd like to hear those too. Please let me know. Thank you. Ultimately, the goal of the piece is I want to both have the process I'm going through be represented in the piece, but I also really want it to be kind of something of a scaffolding for a viewer. So it's the greatest kind of compliments people pay to have ever given me about my art is when they kind of really engage with it and they feel it, and just every once in a while, it feels like someone kind of has the same process that I had painting it as they are looking at it, and that's really kind of what I'm trying to say. Yes. Thank you. I would like them to be beautiful. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yes.
In a lot of the works, there's this kind of relationship between the abstraction and the ephemeral, and then like figurative introductions as well. And I'm curious about how like some of them integrate that and others don't. I'd love to hear a little bit about that process.
Oh, that's a really good question. I'll think about that one. For me, the process of painting is purely instinctual. I never really plan anything out. There's never, I try to take my mind out of it as much as possible and have it. I almost view it as, being a conduit. So I almost want to say, oh, God, I'm not painting. And of course, I am painting. The things that are going through me are the things I'm experiencing in the world. But there does feel like there's kind of a point of coalescence where it's like when I'm creating something, sometimes, it goes, oh, that's what, I was trying to say. That's what was trying to be spoken. And it feels very clear, like it feels like a sharpness. And when I feel that sharpness is when I know that's what it is. And so I'm always drawn to that. And so when that is kind of representational, I guess it's something that is trying to provide kind of, I talked briefly about scaffolding, and it's trying to kind of provide that introductory point, I guess. I think, I'll have a title for a painting, or what the painting's about. Each one has its own subject matter and its own story that can be told, which is meant to, I'll have one that's maybe Jupiter and Semele's painting, which, talks about, I shouldn't even say talk about, but it's about Greek mythology, but that isn't the point of the painting. That's not what the painting's about. The painting's about this experience we're talking about, this, unity, this beauty emerging. and actually I guess I should talk about that painting briefly because, in that one, of course, for those who aren't familiar, the story of Jupiter and Semele in Greek mythology was the story of divine power Zeus. And he had a mortal lover who was tricked by Zeus's jealous wife into asking him to reveal himself in all his power, and for him to come to her as he came to Hera. And so she tricks him into doing this with an unbreakable oath. And henceforth, on encountering the divine power of Zeus, she is obliterated just by the thunderous divine glory of it all. And so it's interesting because as I was painting this, I actually had a figure in there for a while. There was that element of a human figure representing this Semele. And it's kind of interesting because as the painting continued, she disappeared in the painting. Was obliterated, if you will, as kind of often when we're just having kind of an intense experience, our individuality is kind of sometimes subsumed into an experiential point, which is very hard to talk about, which is why we create art. So I don't know if that answered your question at all, but it's a very good question. Yes.
Could you, sorry, this got really loud.
Yes,
Could you
I know.
say the name of the person, his lover again?
Jupiter and Semele. So Jupiter, of course, being the Roman version of Zeus. Yeah, it's a very good story. I'm not a big fan of taking things literally. Be it in modern religion or ancient religion or anything really. And so I see in that story kind of this talking about how it's during the meditative experience or kind of the painting experience or any spiritual experience. Actually, I would go so far as to say there's this aspect of where the separation between yourself and everything else goes away. There's this joining with everything, in which the individuality, your Semele, if you will, is destroyed. Sounds like a bad word, but it doesn't feel bad. It feels wonderful.
Do you start with the concept of title?
Oh, always title later. Every once in a while, a painting comes where it's a full-fledged thing, an idea. But most of the time when I'm painting, it starts with something that I can't really put my finger on, but I know. I don't even want to call it a feeling because it's not even that. It's like an itch, or just like something buzzing. I really try to pursue that, and just kind of. And oftentimes I mentioned that there's this. It feels like a sharpness, and the more I feel that sharpness as I'm creating, the more I know that what I'm doing is on the right track. Sometimes it's almost painful, or sore or something. Exactly, and then by pursuing that, kind of the subject matter just kind of feels like it naturally emerges. Very, very rarely does it not. I guess I have some stacks of paintings that it doesn't. But most of the time, it's doing it just somehow comes together. All right. Well, if there aren't any other questions, thank you guys so much for the great questions and for the attentiveness and listening. And I'll turn it over to Amy.